So, Bill, welcome to the Crypto Princess channel. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Bill, the resident question I ask all of my guests is, if I was to meet in high school, what kind of person were you?
Okay, high school. So I was the biggest player on an American football team. It was a very good American football team in New Jersey. And I was quiet. I was shy, and I was kind of an
Mhm.
anomaly because I was an American football player who also did good in school. So one of the reasons why I was quiet is because I had a little bit of trouble fitting in, even though I was
Mhm.
surrounded by all these stars. It's not exactly in the popular group, right? But I think if you had met me in high school, I think you would have found me to be polite and shy.
Oh, that's so cute. That's so
Right.
cute. How tall are you?
I'm 6 feet tall, and
Mhm.
I'm about 280 US pounds now. And I was a similar weight back then. I really haven't changed much.
Mhm. And what position did you play?
I was an offensive tackle. So if you've seen American football, I would block and move people out of the way so a fast person who would carry the ball could run free.
Oh my gosh. So you were basically the person that, when we look at American football, it's like you were the person that would push into other people and hurt them.
Yes, right. Or like
Sounds
rugby, when
fun.
you would see like a pile of humanity. I was in the American football equivalent of that all game.
Mhm.
So it
Awesome.
was very important.
So you went to university, didn't you? Did you study economics?
I did. Loved
Mhm,
macro.
mhm,
Right. Never forgot some of the things I learned about interest rates from my teachers.
mhm, mhm. What university did you go to?
I went to Rutgers, which is the State University of New Jersey. Some
Mhm.
people think it's Ivy League. It actually isn't, but if you want to think of it that way, I'm fine with that.
Okay, awesome. Straight out of university, you got into a career in finance. Tell us about that.
All right. Well, I was lucky enough to live in the dorm next door to an individual who was probably the best accounting student at the school. He got an internship at JP Morgan at their building at 60 Wall Street the prior
Okay,
summer,
wow.
and he helped me get one of those internships, which is truly unbelievable. I was one of only two kids selected to be on JP Morgan's trading desk for the summer. And then that's its own story because Iraq invaded Kuwait that summer. But after that, I was able to go to work for Swiss Bank Corp, which was bought by UBS, because I was the
Mhm.
assistant dollar Swiss trader uh, during my internship. So I got picked up by Swiss Bank Corp when I graduated.
And don't they have, didn't you receive literally the best training in TA with the Swiss bank?
It was incredible. They
Mhm.
gave us like 6 months of MBA style coursework.
Wow.
Oh, and then the trading desk essentially said, we'll pay for any lessons that you want. So I could take a course. I learned basic technical analysis from, the guy who studied under the guy who wrote the famous book at the time, John Murphy. And then I got to study things like market profile and ways to understand futures. Candlesticks had just come out, believe it or not. Right? Steve
Okay.
Nissen,
Mhm.
the guy who spent his own money to translate the Japanese manuscripts and write the book. I was in a class with him. People thought it was ridiculous. There were only 3 people in the class.
Oh my God. So your education was world class.
Thanks to the Swiss, it was. It was.
Mhm. Gosh. Okay. What did you do after the Swiss bank?
Okay. So I went to the futures exchange in
Mhm.
Chicago. So I went from currencies in New York to futures in Chicago. It was still Swiss Bancorp, but it was a completely different situation, right? In that case, I was in interest rates in bonds, and I was suited for futures because I was large enough to clear a path for options traders who were normally smaller math types. And I was good with charts, which, was a highly valued skill, when a lot of things had to be kept by hand or programs were not necessarily available on the exchange floor yet. And that's when I started writing reports. They would let me off the floor to actually write reports. And that's where my career as an analyst started.
Awesome. And you spent some time at Goldman Sachs, which is absolutely amazing. Tell me about that.
Place. You know what? Here's a confession about Goldman, just to put it in perspective. Working at Goldman to me felt like such a personal accomplishment that I actually, when I started, I had my parents come see the building, and we ate at a restaurant across the street from their headquarters. That's not a story I tell everybody, but I was extremely proud to work at Goldman. They were the smartest group of people I'd ever seen, because at the time, you could have proprietary trading inside of a bank, right? You can't now, but back then it was like, I don't know, it was like a hedge fund inside of a broker dealer. And, when I worked remotely from Texas, but when I would go to the office, I was in awe. And then that's where I started like public speaking. Goldman would send me all over the world to do PowerPoint presentations. And sometimes the salespeople, would have not many bookings when I would get there, but I would do the first presentation. The salespeople would see it, and then they would fill up 7 presentations a day. So Goldman would send me around to do that, and I got to help them chart the 2008 crisis. So.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's amazing. What was 2008 like for you then? You were traveling and just teaching other people about the economics at the time?
No, 2008 was not a travel year. My 2008 story is interesting because all fundamental analysts and all fundamental analysis broke when that started, right?
Oh,
In other words, Goldman was ready for the crisis as a company, right? But in terms of being able to analyze the price action, I was actually in a very fortunate position that my little tactical style of TA, which, now is kind of all over Twitter, but this type of very, unique day-to-day perspective was really the only kind of content that was usable in that kind of volatility. I would publish like 3 times a day. And I was honored that traders were, they were under so much pressure. One guy told me once, I would stare at my screen, at my inbox, waiting for your report to come in. And,
wow.
I stayed at Goldman for 12 years. And, the way I kind of built my reputation was what I was able to do for the company in crisis situations. And it was similar at Morgan Stanley before that. I was the crisis guy. The cheesy American joke is the master of disaster.
I love that, master of disaster. Okay, let's fast forward to 2017. You discovered Bitcoin and crypto.
Right.
Tell me, how did you discover Bitcoin?
Okay, so the guys that used to read my work when I was at Goldman, one of them called me up and said, we would love to hear what you think about Bitcoin. And I was like, what's Bitcoin? So I downloaded the CoinDesk app and started following it. And I went to this incredibly cheesy conference called the Texas Bitcoin Conference, which was electric. Nobody in crypto or blockchain at the time had ever seen like a macro analyst at a conference. So I remember talking to one guy about a chart, and I looked around, and there was 6 people listening over my shoulder. And then I learned it by charting it by hand, like on graph paper. A technical analyst named William Gann did something similar, but I just had to learn it. And eventually, when I went to work at my first crypto job, that's where I really understood it. I understood the technical analysis, and I understood it because I used to be in currencies, right? That's how I understood it. It was like a currency. And, from there, I made a fundamental decision that no matter what it took, because it was not easy, it was not easy, and it still isn't, that I was doing crypto because crypto was important. After seeing 12 years or 6 years of QE and what that was all about at Goldman, I was doing crypto forever.
Tell me about Charlie Shrim. Now, for those people who are unaware, tell us who he is and how you started to work for him.
Okay, it's an interesting story. So Charlie's story, to be brief, he started up an exchange in New York, I believe. I think it actually had a physical location on Wall Street at one point. But Charlie really started the first American trading mechanism for Bitcoin. Maybe it's not the first, but it was reputable. Now, I don't know if I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but you're familiar with Ross, who just got pardoned. Ulbricht from Silk Road. Okay, so Ross was trading on Charlie's platform, and Charlie, at the time ran into Know Your Customer, and he went to jail because of the Silk Road entity was trading on his exchange. And, he had an idea of what the Silk Road transactions were about. So it's funny. Charlie has not gotten his pardon yet. I hope he gets one. With Charlie, I answered an ad on LinkedIn. I think they were looking for an analyst. Charlie calls me. He's running through an airport. He's like, we need an analyst. Essentially, what he was trying to do was trying to start a reputable crypto research company. Like a miniature version of Masari. He had a trader in a Discord and multiple writers, some who had blockchain experience, other people who were experienced journalists. And I was in this incredibly privileged place where it was like I was in awe of what these people knew, what they taught me. And at the time, I added value because I was a Wall Street guy talking about crypto, which crypto had not heard before. We ran into problems. I can tell you the story of the company if you want to hear it, but that's how I got connected with Charlie. And I had a particular loyalty to him and a lot of empathy for what he went through because he had multiple difficult odysseys.
And what were you doing for him?
Okay, so I would write reports. It was one level up from what I did at Goldman. So they were like almost magazine pieces. So I'd write a weekly newsletter and then a big piece because they actually had a fancy magazine that people would read, like Bloomberg Magazine or Business Week back in the day. So it was very interesting. And I did one public speaking appearance at a small conference. You could call it just a conference hall. And I spoke at a conference in Vegas, and I got off the stage, and Charlie said that was the best thing I'd ever seen. And God, I should have gone home and started a YouTube channel that day, but I didn't because Bitcoin went from sick. I got on stage. I talked as a digression. I did the speech. Everyone got excited, went and signed up for Crypto IQ. I got back to my hotel room and Bitcoin was down 25%. Because that was the move from 6K to 3K. That was the crescendo of that awful bear market. So Charlie and all of us, we were in exactly the right place at exactly the wrong time.
And this was in 2017, wasn't it?
This was in 2018.
18. Okay,
So,
the bear market.
right.
Yeah. So for those people who are unaware, in 2017, it's actually my favorite run. Bitcoin started off the year around about $1,000 and it finished the year just under $20,000. And the graph, the chart is absolutely beautiful. Okay, so just a couple of things about the 2017 bull run. Was it difficult going from stocks, shares, and what you were doing previously and bringing that into crypto?
Okay. Actually, for me, it was easy because the thing I loved about crypto was that even though it was digital, it had what I would call a very organic, natural rhythm to it. It moved like a force of nature, not something pushed around by the Fed or by liquidity. It was literally old-fashioned supply and demand, buyers and sellers. So I loved every minute of it. It was the chart person's dream, really. And it moved kind of like a commodities market would move in like the 70s or the 80s because they were very illiquid. They had a lot of big players in the market who could move it around. So nothing really moves like crypto. We all know that. But I was just fine. I was the guy that handled wild things. Normally it was wild on the downside. This was both. Every day was wild.
And were you predominantly trading or investing at the time?
This is a good question. So normally what I did all through Goldman, and I usually do it in crypto, is I just hodl. I don't do a lot of trading simply because people rely on me to have a clear head about day to day, week to week, month to month moves. And if you have some sort of leverage trading position on, you either won't be objective or you can't think clearly unless you have ice water running through your veins, which I do not. So I just hodl and I give the attention to the reader because, believe it or not, I think any good technical analyst really wants to help people, right? You should want to help traders make money and reduce stress. You know, if you meet a technical analyst in a $3,000 suit claiming he's an expert, run the other way, in my opinion.
Okay, let's talk about friends and family now. So you went from something that was very legitimate, very much accepted, stocks, shares, trading, hedge funds, etc., and you got into crypto. Back in 2017, institutions were getting into crypto, and we did have ICO, so there was some legitimacy in crypto, but it was very, very volatile. There was still a huge amount of scams. How did your friends and family, especially your wife, girlfriend, family, how do they feel about that?
Okay, well, most people thought I was kind of crazy for walking away from broker dealers and stocks. Some people said they didn't understand it, but people were happy for me because I was really enjoying the work. Now, I also got a lot of empathy from people because the boom bust cycle is, I mean, it's epic in your P&L. And if it happens to be your job, it's just as epic. You know, it's rags to riches. But my friends from business school, they couldn't believe it. My nickname in business school was Silent Bob. Because I had a very talkative friend who was known as Jay. These are named after movie characters. I didn't talk much. And then I started on YouTube. And as you can tell, I talk just fine now. Perhaps too much.
You talk absolutely fine. Okay, so let's talk about YouTube. Ian Bean, he was very, very big. I mean, he's still big.
Right.
Started tokemetrics, Very, very famous, very, very big. Tokenmetrics is a massive channel as well. How did you get involved in that?
Okay, so again, another LinkedIn ad. I had to wait a while to, to get my foot in the door. They brought me on as a contractor, and we started with a weekly show. So Ian had a weekly show. I would come on and do like a 20-minute segment. It was just called the Market Update, go over some charts. It was pretty simple. And then, if Ian had a question for me, I would answer it. Then we branched off and did something called cryptotherapy, because it was the bear market. So people were upset. We actually even took phone calls and messages. And then the Market Update unto itself kind of grew from there. Token metrics became a going concern after that massive QE, after, I call it cough, cold, and flu to be safe. After that started and central banks put $14 trillion in the market and crypto exploded, Token metrics went from a startup to a company. I was the first guy hired. And, the Market Update eventually grew from like a 20-minute recorded video and 2 live streams a week to live every day, sometimes twice a day. So he just said, put this guy on television.
Okay, we'll get to 2020 in a moment. How did you feel? You were very shy. You were very quiet. How did you feel about YouTube? Putting your face out there.
So this is a good question. So I don't have problems once we start talking. I'm fine. Now, before we start talking, I have like paralyzing stage fright, particularly if like my producer's not there. But it just so happened that whatever natural aptitude was locked inside of me, we found it as a 50-year-old guy on YouTube. Because, I can do this well enough that, people tune in, and that I'm really actually helping people, as is my co-host.
And we'll definitely get to your channel in a little while as well. There's so much to cover. Just very quickly, before we move on, 2017 was a bull market. 2018 was the bear market. It was your first bear market in crypto. How well prepared were you for that?
Well, I had been through the NASDAQ crash, and I had been through 2008. I think I was used to crashes, but nothing quite as shocking as crypto, where literally it can wipe out like the industry. Like, 2018 wiped out a huge amount of Bitcoin miners. So I found it shocking, which is unbelievable, because again, I was in 2000 and 2008. So not only was the price action shocking, but so was this concept of winter, where it would just crash and just sit there. It was like it was dead. Part of what happened was like, people were saying this is dead. Investors, like people who were investing in crypto IQ, that was, Charlie's firm. They were like, yeah, this is done. This is never going up again. That's how bad 2018 winter was.
And what did that do for you? Did you actually, what did it do for you? Did you, was it FOMO? Did you want to get out of it?
Well, I definitely did not want to get out of it. I mean, I kept doing my charts. I should have started my own YouTube channel. That's going to be like our commercials. If I had only done this, I didn't think of it. Okay. So, again, the boom and bust cycle, I can be real with you. When Ian Bellina found me, I was working in the dairy refrigerator in a giant Walmart in Houston during the quarantine period. to give you an idea, that was just like crypto because nobody could go to fast food restaurants. So everyone had to learn how to cook. So what was going on, the physical labor involved there was so interesting. I would do crypto and then I would go to this crazy job that, ended when token metrics became a going concern. So the answer to the question of what did the bear market do to me? It was like I ran into a bear. If you've ever seen what happens to somebody, if they really run into a bear, yeah, I ran into the bear.
So 2018 was a bear market. 2019 was the recovery year. Let's talk about 2020. So 2020 was a halving year. So obviously we expect the bull run afterwards, which we got in 2021. But 2020, we saw the pandemic. People were dying everywhere. Businesses were closing. There was economical concern. There was lockdowns everywhere. Did you ever think that it could have been the end of crypto? And how was 2020 for you?
Okay, so my 2020 was probably very different than the average person's. Like people had to stay home. They were out of business. As you noted, it was very tragic. Okay, my 2020 was unbelievable in the sense that I would be doing crypto all day because I knew from the macro side, I mean, the Fed had printed something like 6 or 7 trillion over the last 12 years. 2008 to 2020, they printed 6 trillion. In March of 2020, they printed another 6 trillion that month. So I was like, oh my God, this is whatever it is, it's all going up. Everything is going up. Now, of course, because it was cryptocurrency, right? Dollar down, cryptocurrency up. Now, what I didn't understand was altcoins, which was what I learned from Ian Bellina. Like I learned Bitcoin from Charlie Shrem, the Bitcoin maximalist, but I learned Ethereum and altcoins from Ian Bellina. I was like, what's MetaMask? Like what Uniswap? What's that? Chainlink? I literally learned it all from the ground up, literally listening to Ian on the show. My education was live, listening to Ian. Okay. So 2020 was an education, and 2020 was also, it was mind-bogglingly busy for me. I was writing crypto, writing articles, doing the live show. I was writing research at the time, right? It hadn't blossomed into daily YouTube, but there were meetings. Like I was in on the ground floor of helping establish token metrics. I was like a C-suite executive, if you will, in all these meetings, helping build this place, right? The story of how they got off the ground by being on Ben Armstrong's affiliate list. And when BitBoy's channel exploded, token metrics, the customers flooded in. A very unique story. And then I would go off to work to do this, extremely physical job where, ironically, just like technical analysis, I was helping women get milk and eggs for their children in a time where it was scary to go outside.
Well, let's talk. We'll talk about that in a moment. Coping with the channel exploding almost overnight. Let's talk about March 2020. So March 2020, Bitcoin was at round about, I think it was like 9,200, and then we had that massive drop because of COVID, and it fell to, I think, something like 9,200, and it fell down to 3,800, something similar to that. Did you buy Bitcoin at the time?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I used what money I had. It wasn't some huge position, but I mean, Charlie told us that if you can get Bitcoin below $10,000, you're set for life. So when I saw 2018 prices, I was like, I tried to get what I could. ETH too. Right.
Okay. Awesome. And how did you cope with the fame? I'll say the fame. So you went from a very small channel, then you got, the affiliate link for BitBoy. We'll talk about BitBoy in a minute because I think you met him as well. And then you were a huge channel. And yeah, how did you adjust?
Okay, well, I appreciate the love, but I don't think I was ever famous, right?
Did
Um,
nobody ever recognize you?
I did get recognized at a couple of conferences. Like I was at Bitcoin Miami, which was the first conference when they opened up the
Mhm.
country. That literally that was the who's who of crypto globally. Everybody was there. Everybody. So some people recognized me, uh, but it wasn't like I was famous. You know, Ian was famous. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, as far as notoriety goes or as popularity, I think anywhere from 4 to 10,000 people would watch the live stream because they were a big channel. All I can say is I took it seriously. Like there's something in the police and military industry in the United States. It's called the prayer of the sheepdog. It's something that people who protect others can say as a prayer. And actually, I tried to get people out of the way of FTX, and I recited the prayer as a desperate attempt to tell people to get out. And I thought that no one would ever watch the show again. And then, you know, the FTX collapse literally started the next day.
Oh my
So
god.
I think
Yeah.
I got famous inside my little community for using a phrase at the time called "get to the chopper," which is from an
Oh yes.
Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger movie, right? Get to the chopper. So, you know, but that wasn't like, you know, that wasn't like BitBoy or Wendy O fame. I was actually, somebody did ask me for their autograph. I actually felt, I felt really good and I felt honored that I had helped this person to that extent.
Mhm. We'll get to FTX. That happened in 2022. Tell me about some of your interviews that you've done. I know you met with BitBoy, you've done some collabs as well. What
Right.
was your impression of BitBoy and some of the other crypto YouTubers and professionals?
Okay. Well, interesting that you would say that. The marketing guy that connected Token Metrics with BitBoy actually got a lot of influencers together, 4 or 5 of us. We were actually the prototype for Around the Blockchain. You know, it was Ian Bellina and me and BitBoy and Crypto Love. And, you know, we would just have a chat about crypto. Um, Everybody liked to kind of pick on me a little bit, make jokes about me because I was the Wall Street guy in crypto. Okay. But the collabs at the time, like, you know, like I was on CoinDesk. Ironically, it was CoinDesk or a famous news service. And ironically, the first thing I told them about was I liked alternative currencies like Dash and Zcash. So I was 5 years early on that, as you can tell by current price action. But, you know, the ultimate experience was, you know, because people may not know this, but Ian Bellina actually helped BitBoy get started. He gave BitBoy advice when BitBoy had 3,000 followers. Then
Oh,
when BitBoy, sorry, then when BitBoy was at the top of his game, Token Metrics itself, we all went to BitBoy studio and we happened to be there for the live stream the day that BitBoy's channel crossed 1 million followers. And, you know, in the tour of the studio, I was the only one who stayed and watched BitBoy do the entire stream. And frankly, I was in awe of his ability to be what you would call the everyman. In other words, he was so relatable. That's why the channel exploded. Now, I also learned things about Ben's history, and, you know, obviously that became an awful tragedy. But, you know, his success was unparalleled. And I don't think crypto's the same because we don't have that one person, that one ultimate person like we had in 2021. But, you know, let
mhm.
me not go too far on my opinion. You know, it was something else. I mean, I remember BitBoy was so famous that local bakeries would send over fancy cookies that were this big with BitBoy's logo on it hoping BitBoy would mention the bakery, in the rural bakery in Georgia, on the air.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to understand how big he was unless you saw it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, gosh. So let's talk about 2021. It would have been your second bull run. We saw Bitcoin start off the year around about 30,000 US dollars, and then we went pretty much straight up. I think there was a lot of stimulus checks and all the rest of it to April 2021, where we hit the Pi cycle top and we hit 64,000 US dollars. We had things like the China FUD, we had things like Tesla selling its Bitcoin. It crashed down 50% and it ranged there for a good couple of months. Bitcoins were taken off the exchanges. The supply shock led to the second peak in November 2021, where we made the all-time high at 69,000 US dollars. Then we had economical concerns. The SEC came in, issued Wells notices to cryptocurrency exchanges and projects and all the rest of it, and we went down into a bear market. It was a double peak. Pi cycle top was only hit once, but we did have that. I don't know if the dead cat bounce, or the second peak as well. It was a whirlwind of a bull run. Now, it was your second bull run, but also it was you in front of lots of people on the on YouTube. What was it like for you?
Okay, one simple word. It was overwhelming. It really was. For example, Token Metrics had private groups that were hundreds of dollars a month. Those customers were asking for so much customized technical analysis that it would take like 4 hours a day to answer the questions, literally. And Ian looked at this and was like, oh my God, just put them live on the air. Let's just do all this live on the air. Even though the customers were paying for it, the fact that it was all live and condensed in one place, that, and we added 2 weekly webinars. So I went from talking once a week or twice a week or doing 20-minute videos to live for an hour every day. So that was a huge change. And then trying to keep up with all the things that were going on. There was the DeFi explosion, right? There was the layer 1 just complete ramp where Solana went from 3 cents to $200, right? Yeah, I had to figure out what a layer 1 was. Ian knew what a layer 2 was and bought Matic for a tenth of a penny and made all the Token Metrics customers rich because he figured out what a layer 2 was, and Polygon went to $3. I was in awe. I was like, I couldn't believe that he found that and understood it. It was a Token Metrics cheat, like number 1 pick. And I don't think I understood it until halfway through that run. And then there's, of course, there's Bored Ape. There's $600,000 for JPEGs, that whole universe. I was an Azuki fan. So you're trying to learn, you're trying to chart. Okay. And I can't recall at the time necessarily looking for a top. It felt like it was going to go to 100K. I came out of Bitcoin Miami. It just felt like it was going to go to 100K Bitcoin. And then I think what really stopped it was inflation and the tightening cycle, right? You knew the Fed couldn't keep rates at 0. And I was like, uh-oh. Right. And, I'd seen blowups like FTX before. That came later. But 2021 was incredible. Ian took us to sorry.
Carry on. Ian took you to...
Yeah, Ian took us to like a club in Miami. And let's just say that there were 5 special groups at this. Like, there were hedge funds, there was Token Metrics. One of the groups was actually FTX itself. I mean, 2021 in Bitcoin Miami. Remember when I told you what I was like in high school? I felt at that club like I was inside of some kind of movie or Broadway production. I wasn't watching it. I was in it. So I don't know, that it was breathtaking. Yeah, it was a moment where I knew, I was like, wow, this is market history. Go ahead. Sorry.
Would you say it was perhaps the most interesting year of your entire career?
2021 was definitely the most interesting. It was the most interesting year. It was the complete opposite of 2008. 2008 was like the dark side of the force. 2021 was like the light was so bright, you had to wear sunglasses.
Okay, so come November 2021, we hit 69,000 US dollars, and then we slid into a bear market. But obviously, when we hit 69,000 US dollars, we didn't know. Nobody knew, or not very many people knew that it was the top of the market, and we slid into a bear market. You were thinking that we could possibly go to 100,000 US dollars. When did you realize that we were in a bear market?
Okay, that's a great question. So, the Fed starts hiking rates to stop the speculation and to stop inflation. So that kind of gave me pause. And then I knew the system, like the whole ecosystem, was in trouble because, believe it or not, for whatever reason, the marketing department had set up a temporary, I don't know, I don't want to say relationship, but like a promotional thing with Celsius. And I interviewed this guy, Alice Mashinsky. And afterwards, I felt like I needed a shower. And there was all this rhetoric like, don't worry, everything's fine, and I had heard exactly the same things before 2008, right? Before that whole thing, the entire system came unraveled. It was the exact same thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a system-wide margin call or liquidation event. And that's when I was like, oh my, and the Fed was hiking rates at the same time. I'm like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was afraid. Like we went to the other side again. Like token metrics, I'm sorry, not token metrics. FTX felt like the end of crypto. Like that crypto might actually break as an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it didn't, I think, is one of the biggest achievements for the crypto industry, that it actually withstood that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for those people who are unaware, 2022 was a bear market. And in the bear market, we have loads of black swan events. We had Celsius, we had 3 Hours Capital, we had Luna, we had FTX, we had Voyager. All these things hit really, really hard. And then in December 2022, we hit the bottom, which was around about about 15,000 US dollars. December 2022, you also started your own YouTube channel. Tell me about that.
Right. Okay. So it was just time to go out on my own. Right. It was that time because, remember I told you with the Charlie Shrem experience, when that bear market started, I should have done my own thing. Kind of the same deal. Right. It was a time in my life where I just decided that I couldn't wait anymore for somebody to give me something or give me a job. I had to go make something happen. Okay. So, we went to Best Buy, we bought the equipment, we turned it on. We're approaching our 500th live stream on that particular channel. And we just literally thank you. Thank you. We just opened the doors and we said, let's go. 16K Bitcoin at the time, what I remember was everybody trying to tell me it was going to 10. And I'm like, it's not going to 10. So that was, it seems the older I am, the more stress I can tolerate. That you wouldn't think that, right? So it was bear market plus entrepreneurship. But here we are, right? Like crypto in 2022, I'm still here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. So you kind of timed, or you hit pretty much the bear market bottom, and you called the bottom at 16,000 US dollars. So well done for that. How did you reach that conclusion? Down. Everybody was like, it's going to go down to 10,000 US dollars.
Yeah, BlackRock. No one understood, one, what the Bitcoin ETF, how big it could get, because I saw the gold ETF get huge when I was at Goldman in 2011. And I saw ETFs from inception as an instrument in 2004, and I saw how big they got back then. And of course, there's BlackRock. Now, to be very simple, companies like BlackRock and Goldman don't do things unless they can dominate. When they do it, they want to dominate. That's it. And BlackRock was so huge when they said, we're doing a Bitcoin ETF. I'm like, oh my God, this is going back to 80. Right? Everybody tried to sell the fact at 48. And of course, there's Michael Saylor, right? Michael Saylor's out there. Mm-hmm. Michael Saylor bought it at his average price in 2021 was $47K. He wrote it down to $16K, and it sat there for 6 months. Right? The guy's a hero, not because he bought 700,000 Bitcoin, because he bought a lot of it at the high in 2021 and had to look at a 50% retracement for every day at work for 6 months. Like, good morning, Mr. Saylor. How you doing? Oh, I'm just fine. My book's down 50%. Oh, isn't this great? We're a computer company speculating in Bitcoin. I mean, people thought he was an idiot for 6 months. And then I knew that when he held on, you have him and BlackRock going after this thing. Galaxy Digital as well. A lot of guys I used to work with at Goldman work over there. I was like, this is more buyers than sellers in a sustainable way versus the ramp from 2017. Bitcoin was going to start trending kind of like bottom left to top right, like a stock would during the QE era. More volatile, but it's like, hello, everybody. Welcome to BlackRock.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the ETF. So after 2022, after the bear market, we had 2023, which was the recovery year. And then we had last year, 2024, which was a halving year. A lot of things happened in 2024. We had the Bitcoin ETF. We had the Ethereum ETF in the early part of 2024. We had an alt season in Q1. We had a small alt season in Q4. We had an extended meme season. We had the president. We had Trump running on Bitcoin, Trump getting into becoming president, and we had so much talk about the Bitcoin strategic reserve, etc. Bitcoin started off the year, Bitcoin did really, really well. Alts didn't do really, really well. It hit an all-time high before the halving, something it's never done before, and then I think it ended the year something like, I think the top was like 108,000 US dollars. So we actually hit the 100K mark. A lot of legitimacy was added into the crypto industry and Bitcoin last year. What was that like for you?
So this is another great question, because, the social media algorithms or social media in general, who would, let's be honest, they would not favor a guy at my demographic and my age, right? Do I look like a crypto YouTuber? Especially not like 2 years ago. However, social media, YouTube, decided that because this was Bitcoin ETF related, I think, they saw me, they heard me, and they're like, you know what? We want this guy talking to people about Bitcoin, because all of a sudden my numbers completely changed. Like if I would do a short video about the Bitcoin ETF, I had 5,000 people on the channel. The channel doubled by doing short videos, like clips, and talking about the Bitcoin ETF. So social media the platforms decided, yeah, okay, we want this guy talking to people about the ETF, about Bitcoin. I'm convinced of that because, like I said, there's plenty of people that know lots about Bitcoin, but for whatever reason, it felt like my content was riding a special wave. So I was very fortunate in that respect.
So the channel really took off. Tell me a little bit more about the channel. So we've got yourself, and then we've also got Toby Ward as well. Toby Ward as well on the channel. Who are your viewers? Are they what kind of people are they? What kind of ages are they? Where are they from, etc.? And what do you do on your channel? Because it really did take off last year, didn't it?
It did. I started with 500 and then I got to 25K. So the channel is me, and then there's a gentleman called the Eagle King, who is the producer who runs the back end, and he is a genius at news and a saint. He's a huge believer in what we're doing. Let's put it that way. Toby Ward is somebody who came in and called the bottom of Solana. She's an analyst. She learned listening to the market update, but she's also got clairvoyant abilities. She can see the future better than the average person, and that's an understatement. So the way I describe the channel is where the YouTube mechanism is kind of the front-facing part of like a research group. So we do research, we have Patreon, we have YouTube members, and then, we have me, the front-facing talking head marketing aspect, where we're also trying to help people. So what do we do on the channel? Well, we try to do research. I would probably be more popular if I did other things, but we're back to this whole help people thing. So we're big believers in the future of crypto, and that's a refreshingly short answer.
And you and Toby get on really, really well. You don't actually see many channels that have a male and a female sitting down together and talking crypto.
You know what? And that is exactly our strategy. It is very simply a man and a woman talking about crypto, not a man and a woman fighting about politics or where we're going for dinner. A man and a woman having a civil conversation about crypto. Her background is completely different than mine. However, when you combine them, okay, the good news is you have something unique. It's so niche where people are starting to get used to it. There's a lot of things I love about it. One of the things I like is I think it's going to be very hard for a computer, so I call Skynet. It's going to be very hard for Skynet to replicate the male-female dynamic talking about crypto and freedom. Which is why, I will essentially, sounding like an American, I will literally fight to the end to keep this thing going, because I have huge conviction about what we're doing it and how we're doing it. How do we get rich and famous? Okay, that's TBD.
Let's talk about 2025 now. So this current year. So last year was a halving year. So after the halving year, we always have a parabolic bull run. Bitcoin has done okay. It's not done as well as I assumed it would have done, but we've still got the rest of the year to go, and maybe further as well. What are your goals for this year? How has this year been for you?
Okay, so the channel has done okay, and the research demand has gotten consistent, so we're grateful for that. But I'm sure this market, generally speaking, stinks. Like the Orange Man sold the meme coin at the top. Everyone said it was a top. I had a hard time believing it. the president of the United States would sell over the top of everyone and make a top of a market that he ran on, but that's what happened. And in my mind, this has actually been a bear market. Like you had a meme spike and then all the way down. Then you had like a Bitcoin spike with maybe a little bit of Ethereum, but Ethereum had crashed first back to 2017 levels, right? And most alts are just completely destroyed, right? People are like, the cycle's over. And I'm like, guys, the cycle never started. What cycle? You had 2-3 month squeezes up and then it collapsed, right? There is going to be a sustained uptrend, particularly when people realize that, they've bought the stock market, and that's good. The AI trade over there is interesting, but there's also an AI trade over here that hasn't been done yet at all. So everyone in the world is long the wrong thing. Or said differently, they're overweighted stocks and dramatically underweight crypto. I know a guy who thinks Bitcoin and crypto should be 20% of your portfolio. Goldman reported worldwide, crypto is 1% of people's portfolio. So has 2025 been kind of hard? Yeah, mainly because we came in with such incredible expectations. It really looked like XRP was going to go to $589. Ha. Right. It really did. And then everything just, literally the entire market just came unglued slowly. So I'm waiting, and I think we're arriving at spring, looking for crypto summer soon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what are your goals for the rest of the year?
My goals for the rest of the year. Well,
or actually, we've only got 2 months left, haven't we? What are your goals for the rest of the year and maybe next year as well? Because we've only got 2 months left.
All right. Well, goals like I would love to be able to spend 14 hours a day on crypto without any, let's call them distractions. I'd love to, be 14 hours a day on crypto. I think in terms of my goals, the next thing that happens, I'm working with somebody on privacy, and I'm working with somebody on real world assets, water, right, on the blockchain. So my goal, because I believe in those things, and if I'm going to be honest with you, even though it could be corny, it could also be impossible, but the goal is to actually make money in crypto, doing something that I actually believe in. Like, you can make money in crypto if you're a good trader and you buy the thing that's mooning, and you take the profit, and it's unemotional. You're supposed to be unemotional when you trade, right? Well, my goal is I want to make money. I want to be prosperous, let's put it that way, by doing things that I believe in. I've actually got 2 things, right? But like all things, like all organisms in nature, gotta be born and survive, right? Like the nature video of the baby turtles hatching on the beach and running to the ocean, trying not to get caught by every nature of monster you can think of. It's literally, you're running for that ocean going, I gotta make it. I gotta survive, because I believe in crypto, the analysis of crypto, my community, these projects that I'm helping in Toby, in the Eagle King. I want to do it. I want to do it the right way.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Bill, for coming on and sharing your crypto journey with us. I really enjoyed learning it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.